Hello guys, how are you doing? Here with you, Anna Tutova, co-founder and CEO of Coinstelegram. And today we have MacLane Wilkison, who is co-founder of Threshold Network and CEO of TL Labs. And Threshold Network powers tBTC, the decentralized and permissionless Bitcoin liquidity hub that connect Bitcoin with DeFi. And they already have over $386 million in liquidity. They integrated with Aave and other protocols, and additionally, MacLane is quite a big advocate for decentralization and privacy, and we're gonna know more about him and tBTC. So great to have you here, MacLane.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me and excited to chat.
So can you tell about your background? How did you discover crypto, and how did you get involved
Mhm.
into this industry?
Sure. So I am kind of like an old man by crypto standards. I back in 2013, I was living in San Francisco and was working out of a hackerspace called Hacker Dojo, and just randomly popped in one day to the SF Bitcoin Devs user group, which was a meetup that happened about once a month. It was a very different world in crypto back then. Like there were only five of us that showed up to this meetup. So you can imagine like the equivalent meetup today, I'm sure would be packed. But it was really fortunate because of the five of us, it was myself, Zucky Manian, who was one of the early contributors to Cosmos and Tendermint, Tom Ding, one of the original co-founders of Dfinity and ICP, and then Michael Agorov, who's now the founder of Curve, and who I worked with to start NuCypher, which was the precursor to Threshold. So it was like sort of very fortuitous to meet this very early group of people that ended up building like really great things in the space, and have an opportunity to work with several of them.
Yeah, so that's really cool to be in the beginnings of the sources of the development of the industry. And can you tell, like, in which projects were you involved? And so you as well, co-founder of NuCypher, and then Threshold Network emerged from NuCypher
Sure.
emerged with Keep. Can you tell more about that? And as well, can you tell, like, well, what were your first ventures since 2013 in the space?
Sure. So sort of the story of the arc was after this meetup, Michael and I started working together and just sort of hacking around on different ideas, almost as a way to just sort of explore the space and better understand what the technology could be used for. And it was very interesting because this was before Ethereum had launched. So like we were basically just all only had Bitcoin and Litecoin and a few others. But we originally started building on top of Bitcoin using these kind of like meta protocols at the time called like one was Mastercoin, Counterparty, and these were kind of like almost like precursors to more expressive smart contract platforms like Ethereum and Solana and others that tried to add some additional expressiveness and functionality to not nearly as expressive as the smart contract platforms today. But we were hacking around in the space. We built like sort of toy peer-to-peer lending applications, some like this like insurance protocol that would pay out based off of like an Oracle reporting some kind of disaster or trigger event for a payout. And then eventually the direction that we went was focusing on privacy and specifically like access control. So at the time, obviously, like there was no Ethereum, so there were no decentralized applications, but there was certainly this idea of the apps that people were very interested in. Um, but obviously there were a lot of like missing infrastructure gaps. And so one of the obvious ones was, okay, if we fast forward 5, 10 years to a world where there's all these different applications, we don't know exactly what they look like, if they would be, entirely new things or sort of just re-implementations of existing Web2 applications. But presumably there would need to be some way to like sort of gate or control access to private or sensitive data within these applications. Like if someone were to build a healthcare application
Mm-hmm.
or like a location tracking application, for example, in the context of blockchain, obviously everything is public, and that's not appropriate for many interesting applications. And so we were just exploring different types of sort of cryptographic primitives that could be used to sort of marry these sort of competing aspects of public ledgers, decentralization with privacy. And we ended up finding an interesting primitive called proxy re-encryption, which sort of enabled some of this functionality that we were looking for to be able to like delegate access to private data specifically to only the people that you want to delegate access to. So in the context of like a healthcare application, you obviously don't want everyone to see your medical records, but you need to delegate those to your doctor, your healthcare provider, your insurance company, for example. And we ended up using this proxy encryption technology to build NuCypher, which was a decentralized network that provided this basically decentralized access control service. That ended up launching on mainnet in 2020. And then about a year and a half or so later, NuCypher and another very similar network called Keep ended up doing the first on-chain merger. So basically, Keep was also a threshold cryptography network working on some very similar things. Their focus was a decentralized Bitcoin bridge. But it seemed like there was an interesting opportunity to kind of smush these two networks together. And so combine all the liquidity, combine the communities, combine all the applications, combine the use cases, and combine the nodes that were providing this threshold cryptography service and potentially have something significantly more powerful than each of them alone. So we went through this like very complicated, sort of interesting, like decentralized merger process where the community basically iterated through different proposals and voted on chain whether to like approve this merger. And ultimately, they did. And so token holders from both sides, from new token holders and Keep token holders, basically voted to combine the two networks into Threshold Network. And functionally, how that worked is a new token, the T token, was created, and that was split equally between the two networks. So if you were a new token holder or a Keep token holder, you could basically upgrade your tokens into the new T token to sort of migrate over into the go forward network. And Threshold Network now is sort of the next iteration of both NuCypher and Keep and the new branding. That's been around, I guess it's been almost 3.5, almost 4 years now that the Threshold Network has been live. And the flagship application for Threshold is obviously tBTC, which I'm sure we'll talk about some more. But yeah, it's been a very long, circuitous journey in crypto, and it's been around for a while, so seen a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, so you're a real OG, and it sounds like you started from Bitcoin when there was not even Ethereum, and now you're as well pushing the industry forward as well from Bitcoin side. So tBTC's decentralized custody contrasts, for example, with wrapped Bitcoin, wrapped BTC.
Mhm.
And last year, you as well made a proposal about the merger with wrapped BTC. So how do you mitigate centralization risk like BitGo's influence?
Yeah, so maybe just to give some context, tBTC, as you said, is basically a decentralized permissionless version of wrapped Bitcoin. And so wrapped Bitcoin obviously is this sort of IOU token that lives on Ethereum and Solana and other smart contract chains that allows you to sort of use your native Bitcoin on the native Bitcoin blockchain today. There's not a DeFi ecosystem. You can't lend, you can't borrow, you can't LP on decentralized exchanges. And these different versions of wrapped Bitcoin, whether it's WBTC or tBTC, give you a way to bring your Bitcoin over to these more expressive platforms and participate in DeFi ecosystem. So generally, people are looking to do earn yield. So like LP and earn trading fees on a decentralized exchange, maybe farm new projects, or also to borrow against their Bitcoin without having to sell it. So you can move it over to Ethereum, you can put in something like Aave or some other lending protocol and borrow stables against your Bitcoin and still retain that exposure to the underlying BTC. And so tBTC, basically the main difference between tBTC and WBTC is WBTC is custodied by a single entity. Now I think it's 3 entities now, but at the time it was single entity BitGo. Versus tBTC is custodied by a decentralized network of signers who are so you're splitting the trust across many entities instead of relying on one entity. And then it's also permissionless. So with WBTC, you have to onboard with you have to perform KYC with a vendor, like go through their onboarding process. tBTC, you just go to the dashboard, interact directly with the smart contracts. There's no one gatekeeping your ability to move back and forth between tBTC and native Bitcoin. And the sort of merger proposal with WBTC which of course ended up not happening. But I guess it was about a year ago now, there was this sort of very controversial announcement by BitGo that they would be expanding the custody of WBTC, and it would no longer be custodied solely by BitGo, but by several other entities. And the controversial piece was that one of these entities was affiliated with Justin Sun, who, for a variety of reasons, has a very controversial profile within the crypto space. Has had a lot of success, but also has been, involved in a lot of, I guess, questionable things that have happened with various projects and the associated collateral being compromised one way or another. So I think there was True USD, which was a fiat-backed stablecoin. There was Wobi's HBTC. Basically, what happened with both of those projects is the underlying collateral, something happened to it. It's kind of very unclear what happened to it and who was involved in that. And so I think there was this very, very strong immune response across the DeFi community when this was announced, because WBTC was really the first Bitcoin derivative in DeFi. So it's deeply embedded, particularly in the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem across many decentralized exchanges, AMMs, lending protocols. And the lending protocols in particular, were obviously very exposed to something potentially happening to the underlying collateral. And so there was a pretty significant backlash to this announcement, and many protocols ended up actually offboarding WBTC as collateral in order to minimize their risk exposure in the event that something bad would happen to the underlying Bitcoin collateral. And so what we had proposed at Threshold was, hey, here's an alternative. Instead of doing this, splitting the custody with these Justin Sun associated entities, potentially you could do something similar, but with Threshold instead. So replace, instead of basically replacing the underlying custody for WBTC with this decentralized network of Threshold nodes. So you're basically splitting the trust across many different entities. And then this would potentially be much more amenable to the vast majority of DeFi protocols that were looking at potentially offboarding WBTC as a result of their announcement. And so the idea was, this could potentially mitigate the risk of something bad happening to the underlying WBTC collateral in the future. It would be something that would be much more acceptable to the vast majority of protocols that use WBTC as collateral, particularly lending protocols. So obviously that didn't happen. They decided to go forward with the original plan, and unfortunately, I think we've sort of seen the results of that. Is if you look at the bridge activity of WBTC, it's basically there has not been a single meaningful mint other than I believe 0.01 Bitcoin test mints as they onboarded new vendors since that deal was. So obviously WBTC still has quite a lot of TVL because most of it's parked in lending protocols, but really impression is that it was going to slowly just sort of bleed out TVL over a long period of time. And I think that's proven out in the market where basically no one is now minting new WBTC.
And as well, in your case, are these third parties always the same, or each time they may be different?
Yeah, so the way that tBTC works is there is a set of basically doxed known entities of around 30 entities and individuals and community members who provide currently, that number could be expanded, but who currently provide the custody service for tBTC. And these are a mix of professional staking providers like P2P or Stake.us, Kiln, et cetera. And then, known individuals who've been around Threshold or the broader DeFi space for a long period of time. And then of this set of 30, the way that it works is about every 2 weeks, a new deposit address is generated in the system. And the system will randomly sample from this 30 to create signer sets for each particular wallet of 100 signers. And as long as a majority of those signers agree, that Bitcoin can be moved. For example, if someone requests a redemption back to native Bitcoin, a majority of the signers on a particular wallet would need to say, yes, this is a valid redemption request. We'll process this for you. So it basically rests on this honest majority assumption across a set of permissioned known entities. And there are many different wallets in the system. So it's not like it's one giant multi-sig or giant wallet. Every 2 weeks, a new wallet's generated, deposits during that time period go into that wallet, and then a new wallet is created. So there's at any given time, there's roughly probably around 10 or so active wallets in the system.
Yeah, that's a great model. And can you tell with which DeFi protocols is tBTC integrated and what yields are possible?
Yeah, so right now, the vast majority of tBTC liquidity is on ETH1 because that's where we started. It's on basically all of the blue chip protocols on ETH1. So I think the biggest liquidity sink right now is Aave. So you can deposit tBTC onto Aave and borrow stables or other assets against that Bitcoin. There's also quite a bit of TVL in like CRV USD, which is Curve's CDP stablecoin. There's a lot of usage in people LPing on DEXs, whether it's Curve or Uniswap or others. Sparkland also just onboarded tBTC about a month ago. So basically everywhere on ETH1, all the major protocols, you can use tBTC at this point. On EVM L2s, it's also quite popular, so quite a bit of liquidity on Arbitrum. It's on GMX on Arbitrum, so you can trade perps with tBTC. A lot of the same use cases on the EVM L2s in terms of LPing and borrowing. And then we're also expanding to non-EVMs. So it's on Solana, and we're going to be shortly launching direct minting. So currently the way tBTC works is you have to sort of pit stop on Ethereum first, and then bridge it to your EVM L2 of choice or your altchain like Solana of choice. But we want people to be able to go directly from Bitcoin to Solana or to Sui or Darknet or wherever. So soon we'll have direct minting to Solana, and hopefully we'll see strong growth in the Solana ecosystem as a result of supporting Solana as a first-class chain for tBTC, and then repeating that across many ecosystems. Usually the yield, it depends on what you're doing. Like if you're just stable pair LPing, like with another Bitcoin asset like WBTC, in a DEX like Uniswap or Curve, usually it's like single-digit organic APY based off of trading, how much utilization the pool gets. You can obviously you can do interesting things. If you want to take like a leveraged bet on the price of Bitcoin, you can deposit into Aave, another borrowing protocol, borrow stables, buy more Bitcoin, a sort of leverage loop. So you have a leveraged position on BTC. There's also a lot of people that are using tBTC to farm various points programs, which could potentially have a much higher APY. Obviously, it's very speculative because you don't know what the ultimate price of these tokens are going to be as a result of the points that you farm. But you can put tBTC into EigenLayer, Symbiotic, a lot of these restaking protocols to provide security to their AVSs. Bitcoin L2s like Bob and Mezzo also support tBTC, so you can put your tBTC into those ecosystems and start earning sort of either Mezzo points or Bob points in anticipation of their upcoming network launches and presumably some sort of TGE. Obviously, much harder to predict what the APIs of those points programs would be, but potentially very attractive.
Yeah, I think you should see quite a big influx of new liquidity providers and users with Solana integration. That's the
Yeah,
most hype now.
Yeah, I think we're very excited about that. Right now, the liquidity for tBTC on Solana isn't that big, but I think a lot of that has to do with how difficult it is to get tBTC over to Solana. You have to go from native Bitcoin, stop, ETH1, and then use Wormhole to bridge it to Solana. But very soon you'll be able to skip that entirely and just go directly from native Bitcoin to Solana. And I think that will open up a lot of opportunities for the Solana ecosystem to really bring Bitcoin to their DeFi ecosystem in a way that it hasn't been yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. And beyond tBTC, what new primitives in Threshold are you building to advance Threshold cryptography?
Yeah, so historically, we built a variety of different threshold primitives at the Threshold, and previously NuCypher, obviously, like proxy re-encryption, was one of the initial ones. We also built something called Taco, Threshold Access Control, which is in the process of spinning out kind of as its own separate project. We are also very closely tracking a lot of the new innovations in Bitcoin bridging design. So I think, as I mentioned before, the way tBTC works now, it's this honest majority assumption. And the signers participate in something called a distributed key generation ceremony, which is a type of threshold cryptography to basically generate a shared address that they're collectively custodying and that no single signer has control over. And then they use threshold signatures to basically process mint and redemption requests, so to move the Bitcoin around in ways according to the rules of the protocol. Well, we're very closely tracking these new innovations around BitVM2, which could enable us to improve the trust assumption from an honest majority assumption to a one of n, meaning like if any single signer on a particular wallet in tBTC is honest and rational, then that Bitcoin is totally secure and cannot be basically cannot be stolen. So obviously going from an honest majority, 51 of 100, to just needing one honest actor is a pretty big order of magnitude improvement. And so I think we're very interested in seeing, how those designs progress and mature as they start to launch into production. And we'll be very keen to potentially upgrade tBTC's custody to use BitVM2 vaults if that technology proves out.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you're focused quite a lot on the privacy. So how can Web3 balance transparency and privacy needs?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely challenging. By default, most blockchain ledgers are fully transparent and fully public, intentionally by design. Obviously, like a few notable exceptions that have seen good success, like Zcash and Monero. tBTC itself is not like a mixer. It doesn't obfuscate. When you go back and forth over the bridge, that's traceable. It doesn't obfuscate, the origin or the destination of funds that are moved across the bridge. Obviously, there are things you can do once you've bridged it to Ethereum, which, I guess is the last couple years has been kind of unclear. Like there was a lot of controversy around Tornado Cash and that being listed on the OFAC sanctions list, and then very recently, sort of under the new administration, that was removed. So I'm not advising anyone to go use Tornado Cash yet, but I think that's very interesting to pay attention to see if now, is that going to be a viable way for people to achieve privacy on Ethereum L1 again by using Tornado Cash. If that, basically if the legal and regulatory risk of using that as an individual is significantly de-risked or removed entirely. So C itself, does not do any kind of obfuscation or mixing, but depending on the legal and regulatory environment, obviously can give you access to those types of tools that may exist in Ethereum and other smart contract chains, and give you the rails to move your Bitcoin over there and take advantage of them there.
And as well, what's your take on zero knowledge proofs and T versus threshold cryptography for privacy preserving apps?
Yeah, so I mean, I am very much in the camp of trust math and not hardware. I think T's trusted execution environments are good as like one sort of layer in a sort of a defense in depth type of strategy. But I think if you're basing your entire architecture on the assumption that these TEEs are secure, that's a poor design in the context of these sort of trust minimized, decentralized blockchain environments. I mean, I think historically there's been several projects that have tried to take this, and unfortunately, just like there's been repeated like critical exploits and vulnerabilities, particularly in Intel SGX TEEs, which is the one with the most adoption. I think the open source designs, there's a few open source TE designs, I believe like Keystone are interesting. But I still wouldn't, if I was designing a system, I wouldn't rely on T's as sort of the base privacy or security assumption. only as like, kind of like something that adds some defense and depth. I think if you can rely on the actual provable security and provable privacy of some like zero knowledge proofs or fully homomorphic encryption, I think that is a much more long-term, robust type of approach that I would like to see the space eventually settle in.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And can you share as well plans for the development of Threshold Network and T-Labs?
Absolutely. So right now, so basically like T Labs is the new development company for tBTC. Previously, everything was managed by the DAO,
Mhm.
which was, I think there's a lot of challenges with that. I don't think DAOs are able to ship product effectively if they're not working with a service provider. So basically, T Labs is now the service provider for Threshold and replaces the DAO and sort of the daily operational aspects of the protocol. So product development, marketing, business development, et cetera. The only thing that needs to be decentralized, the only thing that matters to be decentralized for Threshold and tBTC is how the Bitcoin is custodied. It doesn't matter like if product development is decentralized or if marketing is decentralized. So all those sort of ancillary functions are being bought into T Labs. And so they'll be more accountable for the DAO to deliver results. And on the product development roadmap, we want to make the cross-chain experience for tBTC 10x better. So right now, I've mentioned a couple of times, if you want to use tBTC, if you want to bridge your Bitcoin over to, let's say, Solana or some EVM L2, you bridge it over on tBTC, first to Ethereum L1, and then you have to bridge again to that destination chain. So that's just not a great experience for users. It's clunky. It's sort of confusing. It's also at times, expensive if the gas costs on Ethereum are high. And so we want people to be able to go directly from Bitcoin to whatever their destination chain of choice is. So directly minting to Solana, to Arbitrum, to Optimism. So that will be a big focus is with this direct minting support and functionality, and then also just dramatically expanding where tBTC is available. So many new non-EVM chains, many other the non-supported EVM chains will be launching on very quickly. When a new ecosystem that people are excited about launches, we want tBTC to be there day one so that it becomes like the default canonical Bitcoin asset on that chain. And so we'll be very quickly over the next couple of months launching a bunch of new ecosystems. And then as well, like keeping an eye on BitVM2 and potential improvements to the fundamental custody of tBTC is another area that we'll be working on.
Yeah, that's important to be available for all the communities and for all the networks. And as well, I saw your tweeted article of James and Loeb on quantum computing and the threat to Bitcoin. So do you foresee a threat of quantum computing to Bitcoin and crypto?
I mean, certainly, like at some point, it will be a threat. I mean, like the current signature schemes for Bitcoin are not quantum proof. Obviously, question upon in terms of like when that will be an issue. I don't think it's imminent, but I do think it's worth the Bitcoin community discussing now and sort of coming to some sort of social agreement and consensus around how to handle it when it does become an issue. Obviously, like the worst case scenario is to ignore it, not talk about it, not take any approach, not take any active steps to prepare for it. And then it comes and like all of a sudden, UTXOs are getting stolen when someone has a quantum computer that can break the signature schemes. I think his argument was that at some point there should be, and people should go read the article if they're interested, rather than me paraphrasing. But at some point there should be a sort of drop dead date for people to move vulnerable UTXOs to a quantum proof signature scheme. And then if they don't do it by that date, the protocol should basically just fork and delete those coins. And basically just don't allow, someone with a quantum computer to basically steal those coins. Like for example, if Satoshi is dead or doesn't have access to his tokens anymore, those should be removed and deleted from the protocol. They shouldn't be, just left there until they're exploited or stolen. And I think that is I think I agree with his suggestion. Like I think that's the best approach to respect people's property rights.
Mhm.
Obviously, like have any good choices in that scenario. So you're gonna have to violate like property rights in some way. Either they'll be stolen by a bad actor that has a quantum computer, or you just delete the tokens. And I think the least bad option in that case is to delete coins, burn coins that aren't migrated to a quantum proof scheme by some sort of drop dead date.
And do you work in Threshold and tBTC on any quantum proof tools?
Yeah, so I mean, once obviously, like we're actively maintaining tBTC. So once there is some sort of social consensus on in terms of what signature scheme, quantum proof signature scheme to migrate to, we would certainly do that. So currently, the system uses Threshold ECDSA.
Mhm.
We're interested in upgrading to Schnorr, and we would be interested in upgrading to whatever quantum proof scheme the community agrees on in the future as well. Obviously, we would definitely want to make sure that the Bitcoin custody in tBTC is not vulnerable to some sort of quantum computing exploit.
Yes, it sounds scary and quite vital to take actions now. And can you share what trends in the industry do you see this year?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's been certainly an interesting year, particularly recently with a lot of the geopolitical the sort of instability and sort of this potential trade war that sort of trade war regime that the world may or may not be entering into, depending on the day, whether tariffs are happening or not. But it's been interesting to see Bitcoin's behavior, which it seems to have held up, relatively well compared to many other assets. And so I think it's talking about Bitcoin specifically, interesting to see if this will be sort of the trigger for some sort of decoupling event for Bitcoin. I think it obviously like I'm an American, so like I want America to be successful and strong, but like I think there's a possible world where like treasuries in the US dollar are not suddenly as attractive of a reserve asset
Mhm.
for most of the rest of the world. And if that happens, like there's a limited set of potential assets that could be viable replacements. Obviously, gold, historically would be the one. But I think this would be very interesting to see if Bitcoin can deliver on its sort of digital gold narrative and positioning as a superior version of gold that is much more transportable, can be easily transferred, and much easier to secure than you're having to build like a giant bunker to put your gold in a vault somewhere. So yeah, I mean, for Bitcoin, very interesting times. We'll see.
And how do you see the current market? Like whether this Bitcoin dominance will continue and whether we ever see altcoin season?
I think a lot of ties into what I just said. Like, I think this is potentially a decoupling event for Bitcoin. If people flee what have historically been sort of the safe assets, and they view Bitcoin as the safe asset instead, and like if some central banks or sovereign wealth funds sort of start to pile into BTC, that could be a major trigger, for Bitcoin. And so obviously in that scenario, I would expect Bitcoin dominance to go up significantly. Um, but at the same time, like I assume for the real projects, I mean, like DeFi in particular has been just absolutely obliterated, like not performing well the last few months and last few years. But also realistically, it's one of the very few spaces in crypto which has product market fit. So I think for the projects that are generating revenue, that have real utility and real usage, and they have a correct tokenomics, like where they're able to distribute the revenue that they're generating and return that value to token holders. I think at some point there would be some sort of repricing of those assets to the upside, to the extent that they're currently undervalued.
And on your side, are you Bitcoin maxi or do you invest into any altcoins?
I mean, I love Bitcoin. Obviously, that was sort of my first introduction to the space. I love Ethereum as well. I'm obviously building in DeFi for a long time with tBTC. I mean, we're very interested in taking tBTC everywhere. So we want tBTC to be totally credibly neutral. We're not going to pick and choose ecosystems based off of like, what we like or don't like. Like if people want to use Bitcoin in their ecosystem, um, they should be able to. And we want tBTC to be credibly neutral, to not preference any one ecosystem over the other. So, tBTC will be on Ethereum, it'll be on Solana, it will be on all the EVM-L2s, it'll be on all the non-EVM chains. We want it to be everywhere where people want access to Bitcoin. And I think it is actually important, particularly for new entrants. Like a lot of times they'll come to join a new ecosystem, and then at some point, they'll trickle back and get some Bitcoin. And we want to make that as easy for them as possible. And tBTC, I think, is a way for us to contribute in that area.
And as well, what are your price predictions for Bitcoin by the end of this year?
I don't know that I could do good price predictions. I mean, I think like it's an interesting thought experiment. Like if Bitcoin were to achieve like the market cap of gold, I think that takes it to somewhere between like 750K to a million per BTC. So that's like the bull case. I think in the medium term is Bitcoin basically delivers on its vision of digital gold and replaces gold, which would take us to, anywhere from 750K to 1 million. I don't know if that will happen this year. But
How
that's
many
the
years are needed for that, in your opinion?
sorry.
How many years are needed for that, in your opinion?
I mean, it could happen very quickly. Like again, like if this is like sort of a very unique moment in the world where sort of everyone is reevaluating their position in terms of trade relationships and what assets do they want to accrue as like a reserve asset, what are the safe assets. I think there's a real opportunity for Bitcoin to really outperform and to shine. So I think it's possible that could happen very quickly. This is, I guess, like the hyper Bitcoinization narrative that some people are bought into. We'll see. I don't think it's totally out of the question that it could happen quickly.
Okay, let's see. Bitcoin proved already that it's a new asset class and it's not some scam. So let's see how this industry will be revealing. And thank you for such interesting conversation and wish you good luck and more growth for Threshold and tBTC.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.